Hello everybody and welcome to the Chase Life podcast, episode 10 with Rachel and David Godfrey. So today we are talking all things fat loss, and who better to answer all of these questions than Rachel. So for those of you who don't know or who perhaps are new to us, Rachel is considered by many in the fitness industry to be the original female leader in the fitness industry. So I've got just a few quick highlights from Rachel's career that I'm just going to read out quickly, and then we'll get stuck into the questions. So, firstly, Rachel's career started in the weights room at 13 years old after dislocating her shoulder and being told that she was a floppy rag doll by a surgeon. So she went on to graduate a bit later as a physiotherapist, and the rest, as she often says, is history. So Rachel spent many years in strength and conditioning as head coach at Platinum Extreme Mixed Martial Arts Gym, and the head of S&C, head of strength and conditioning at the global brand Wimp to Warrior. Rachel was also a lecturer and presenter for FMA strength training. She then founded Athletic Fox in 2010, focused on women's health and fitness. Rachel has featured in many publications as a fitness model and regular contributor and expert advisor, including Shape Magazine, Oxygen, Australia, Men's Fitness, Women's Health, and Cosmopolitan. She's also an Oxygen Australia cover girl. And over her 15-year career, she's become one of the industry's most experienced and well-respected trainers and savvy businesswoman. She's coached over 1,000 women in long-term sustainable fat loss, and for the last 10 years specialized in helping busy professional women, execs, and business owners get a grip on their body, business, and lifestyle. So, without further ado, let's launch ourselves right into the question. And starting with question number 1, how can I avoid getting fat in pregnancy?
Oh my God, this one could open like a massive can of worms. So, let's caveat this first of all. And, I don't often explain myself, but for this one I will, because having been pregnant twice myself and struggled somewhat in the early phases of pregnancy with hyperemesis, I'm going to talk a little bit about morning sickness as well here. So, when you fall pregnant, that is not a time to lose weight in most circumstances. It is also not a time to think about staying shredded. When you're growing a baby, inevitably, we all gain some body fat, and you have to be okay with that before actually coming into pregnancy. And so one of the things that I say to a lot of women is, if you want to stay fit and healthy during pregnancy, the journey starts before you even consider getting pregnant, because the trap that so many ladies get themselves into, like, let's look at the typical journey. Somebody starts in their 20s on the yo-yo dieting, up and down, doing various different diets, doing crazy cardio, and basically finding completely unsustainable methods to just about hold their body and their body fat in a reasonable range. Okay, some people really struggle with this, and obviously, gain 5, 10, 20 kilos. Some people lose 5, 10, 20 kilos, and it's kind of like this up and down. A lot of the time, women are really battling all through up until the time that they are falling pregnant. And this doesn't even necessarily mean reflecting this in their physique. A lot of it is just a mental game for them as well. So mentally and emotionally, they're torturing themselves with, oh my God, I've eaten too much today, so I'm now going to go and do this extreme method of, some of the clients that we talk to are, training like 2, 3, 4 hours a day for a slip up they had the day before. So this is not uncommon. When it comes to then falling pregnant, what usually happens, of course, when you fall pregnant, is that you can't then sustain these crazy methods. You can't be yo-yo dieting because it's going to, affect the health of your child, possibly. You can't be doing crazy cardio because, quite frankly, certainly in the first trimester, most of the time you feel like death because morning sickness is awful. And then, second trimester, okay, you might feel okay. And then the third trimester, you feel like a whale and you don't feel like doing anything. So there has to be a balance in the very beginning, and, having something that's sustainable so that you can sustain, a relatively healthy body fat in the beginning even before falling pregnant. Now, that's not to say if you are pregnant already, or if you've really struggled with, gaining weight during pregnancy and you're now trying to lose weight after pregnancy, it doesn't mean that, all shit has hit the fan and you can't do anything. There is plenty that you can do, but that would be the first place to start. If you're thinking about getting pregnant, please find yourself a sustainable way of maintaining a healthy body weight prior to falling pregnant. And a lot of the time that involves working on your emotional fitness. So during pregnancy, what usually happens is we think that we can start immediately eating for two. And that is not true at all. In fact, it's only in the last trimester, so from 27 weeks onwards, that you would need an extra 200 to 250 calories per day. Now, that's actually not a lot of extra food. It's a small snack, if anything. So what a lot of ladies do when they come in, they've struggled with this yo-yo dieting up and down in the crazy ways of crazy training to maintain a physique, come in full pregnant and stop everything. And actually, for a lot of women, it's an emotional relief to fall pregnant, because now they don't have this pressure of, oh my God, thank God I can stop like these crazy behaviors. So that then gives them permission to basically go on an all-out 9 to 10 month binge. And I've spoken to so many ladies, consulted with so many women through their pregnancies, that this is actually what has happened. So when it comes to, I get asked the question a lot, well, how did your diet change in pregnancy? The answer is that it didn't. If anything, it didn't change at all. I was eating exactly the same prior to falling pregnant as I was when I fell pregnant, aside from obviously the first trimester. Now, let's give a special mention to the first trimester and talk a little bit about morning sickness. In my opinion, having struggled twice with hyperemesis, and I'll be honest, sitting here as your wife, this is the reason that I'm not having a third child. I cannot go through hyperemesis for a third time, because it is honestly, it's been probably the most mentally and emotionally draining experiences, feeling that ill for so long.
Yeah, Rick was calling you the White Walker.
Yeah, so Rick, my brother, he's a little shit sometimes. I don't know, I didn't know what a White Walker was. But I was told in Game of Thrones. So anyway, I Googled what a White Walker is. And yeah, apparently I look like a White Walker, or the White Walker from Game of Thrones during both of my first trimesters. So thanks to my brother for that one. Anyway, needless to say, I was very thin, very pale, and couldn't keep anything down. So I actually had a medicated first trimester up to 20 weeks. I was on some pretty strong drugs, antiemetics, to obviously stop the severe sickness. Now, not everybody has it that bad, but most women struggle with some form of morning sickness, and it's actually all right. Sometimes it's worse than others, but irrelevant. It's still awful to go through, and it's a mixed feeling of, you're so excited that you're pregnant, but you have this feeling of, oh my God, when the fuck is this going to end? Because morning sickness is awful. So, a lot of women say, well, how can I eat healthily when I've got such bad morning sickness? I just don't feel like eating anything. Or, if I do feel like eating something, it's like toast with some butter. Honestly, just my advice to you is just get through the first trimester. However, whatever you need to do, just get through the first trimester. For me, Ruffles crisps, or Ruffles chips if you're American, were my go-to foods, like the crinkle cut chips, and basically dry toast. And then I would have, what else was I having?
Ice lollies from time to time.
Oh, ice lollies from time to time as well. Those were kind of my...
And those baby biscuits.
Oh yeah, rusks, baby biscuits. And that was a tip from my mum, actually, because she used to eat those when she was pregnant with me and my brothers. But, you've got to find the foods that you can eat. Now, obviously, after that, you want to start prioritizing your health, because your health, you want to look after yourself, of course, as your growing child. So when it then comes to the second and third trimester, the truth is that this is why you've got to have a normal balanced diet in the beginning, because otherwise, where do you fall back to? What is your baseline? And that's something that we're also going to cover later on today, is what actually is your baseline? What's your foundation for eating, for life?
The trouble I see a lot is that people's fat loss is not being driven by health. And it really, it's a bit of a shame that it's called the health and fitness industry, but if anything, both of those terms have been replaced by the aesthetics industry. So people are now. I believe that if aesthetics is your goal, then it should be driven by health and fitness anyway.
100%.
But people are going to these, just completely unsustainable extreme methods that are perfectionism and all or nothing. And obviously, when it comes to having a baby, health has to come first. It has to.
100%.
And so, but people have no idea how to do that.
Exactly. And, this is the time to tidy up your nutrition and start learning about nutrition and emotional fitness while you're pregnant. Because if you're struggling to cope emotionally while you're pregnant, let me tell you, shit is going to hit the fan when you actually have the baby. And I say that because a lot of women say, oh, God, I've put on so much weight during pregnancy. I'll just worry about it when my baby's arrived. I'm like, honey, start now, because start implementing good habits now. And this is not about thinking about losing fat in pregnancy. It's not that at all. We shouldn't come in with this mentality. We should come in with what is the best I can do to optimize my health right now. And so for a lot of people, that is, of course, eating more vegetables, having a fairly high protein diet. We're going to go into this a little bit later, but rather than going for, processed foods, artificial foods, cheat foods, these.
Well, which, I don't know if you wanted to move on at this point, but I might move some of this around, because one of the questions coming up is, where do I even begin with to lose weight? Do you want to go into that now? Because it,
so that
to me, it kind of,
it does follow on. So when once you've been through your pregnancy, you've been through basically the first 6 to 8 weeks postpartum. And there's a couple of other questions that relate to this in here, so we probably tie these in. But at some stage, it's a good idea to think about now prioritizing your health, because your health as a mummy is going to affect your health, the health of the baby. Now, obviously, if you're breastfeeding, it's really important to make sure that you get enough calories in, because otherwise your child is going to be drinking skim milk. Okay, so we want your milk to be nice and nourishing and nutritious. And this is a tip that I've learned from a very experienced midwife. Is if you are breastfeeding, it's really important to nourish yourself with healthy foods. That's not to say that you need an excess of calories from a shit source. So just because you're breastfeeding, it doesn't mean that you need a huge amount of calories, but you do need enough calories to produce good quality, healthy milk. Now,
what would you say if somebody was then going to literally track the extra calories and measure that out?
I wouldn't advise that, and it's completely unnecessary. So let's get into what is the where do I even begin?
Yeah.
What was the question?
So where do I even begin to lose weight? Because we have lots of people reaching out to us who have been so monumentally confused, left, right, and centre. They've tried, low carb. They've tried keto. They've tried intermittent fasting. They've tried everything under the sun and had so many conflicting opinions that they just don't know where to turn and they don't know where to start. Okay,
so let's strip it all back. And this follows on from the pregnancy question of, where do I even begin? I speak to so many mummies who are 12 weeks to 12 months, sometimes postpartum, and just say, where do I even begin? So what I'm going to tell you now, I'm actually going to give you what you want, and I'm going to show you what you need, and I'm also going to tell you what you need to hear as well. So let's talk about strategy here. A lot of women up until this point have been tracking calories and macros, counting things, adhering to dieting rules, got all of these funny behaviors and picked up all these funny behaviors along the way. And it's made the whole process of fat loss really, really stressful. So my approach to nutrition is to wipe the slate clean. And whenever I have a new client coming in who has got a serious dieting history or needs some help with their emotional fitness, we just start from the very basic, which is what we call baseline nutrition. Now, with baseline nutrition, we would advise basically eating 4 meals a day. Now, those 4 meals a day are proper meals, but there is no snacking outside of those meals. And these 4 meals are to be based on a good protein source, so preferably, a meat source. I'm not going to talk about vegans. If you're a vegetarian, obviously you use vegetarian protein sources. If you're vegan, sorry, I don't cover that. I don't work with vegans for a variety of reasons, and you need to go and see a specialist if you want to go and continue on your vegan diet. So you want to have a protein, which is really important. Then to build your meal, you need a nice handful of vegetables. Of course, we like green leafy vegetables, but that doesn't mean that you can't eat colored vegetables, because I think colored vegetables have also been demonized in the industry today. So by all means, please load your plate up with lots of carrots. You can use tomatoes. Yes, I know tomatoes are a fruit, but I'm using this as an example. Use lots of color on your plate. Use colored capsicum or peppers if you're in various different parts of the world. So make sure that you've got lots of color and lots of variety on your plate. And so, for example, a big salad is is awesome for packing in your nutrients and obviously keeping, your calories at a relatively healthy level. So you've got your protein, you've got your vegetables, and then we would add a small fat portion. So if we talk about portion sizes, so as a rough starting guide, we would look at 1.5 pounds of protein. We'd look at 1 thumb of fat, or 1 tablespoon of fat, and that's like a flat tablespoon, not like a heaped tablespoon, because a lot of people, go to the nut butter jar and like have a massive heaped tablespoon. And then we've obviously got your vegetables. Now, that is the basis of your meal. Now, before anybody says, well, where the hell are the carbs? Don't worry, the carbs are coming. So in 2 of those meals, if you are exercising, you would also add a serving of carbohydrates. Now, a standard serving of carbohydrates would be 1 cooked cup. Or like a good handful of carbs. So, for example, a cupful of rice. So let's go through that again. So if we're looking at 1 meal, we'd be looking at 1.5 pounds of protein. We'd be looking for 1 thumb of fat, a whole heap of veggies, and they can be green leafy veggies or colored vegetables. And then we'd be looking at a carb source in 2 of those meals, and that would be a cup size or a handful size. Now, that would be 4 meals per day. And you would eat nothing outside of that. This is the very beginning of baseline nutrition. Now, if you can just eat just those 4 meals, and say, for example, you fancy a snack, you fancy some chocolate if that's your thing, if you fancy a glass of wine, that's your thing, great, go ahead and add it in. Now, a lot of people are going to be listening to this and going, oh, well, that seems way too easy. Or the other, oh my God, that sounds like an awful lot of food. But the truth is that if you can't even stick to that, you've got no business going in and trying to make your diet even more complicated, tracking your calories and macros, doing keto, taking this out, adding this in, etc., etc. Instead of thinking like we need to switch our mentality when it comes to health. Stop thinking about what you can't eat and think about all of the things that you can eat. Now, those 4 meals, this is just a guideline as a starting point.
Yeah, it's a starting framework, right?
100%. It is a starting framework. So in my experience, what I found is a lot of women really even struggle just to eat those 4 meals. Even though their hunger, their energy and cravings are satisfied within those 4 meals. And the reason being is because we're dealing with emotional hunger, which is a completely different subject. If we're just exclusively talking about the physical and what you need to eat for weight loss, that is it. However, let me just say, if you're eating those 4 meals, I suspect, and I say I suspect because it's not always black and white, and the longer and the more experienced you become at something, you understand that things aren't actually black and white. The answer is always like, it depends, and it depends on the client and various different things. But you are not going to gain weight if you're eating in this manner. You will gain weight if you're trying to eat tiny portion sizes and then you're binging. That is when you're going to get fat. And that is when you're going to stay fat. Eating more good food is not going to make you fat. Okay, that's a really important message to get through on today's podcast, because so many women are terrified of food. And so if you can just, this would be your starting point, eating 4 meals in that manner. Do that for a month.
Yeah. Who do you know who is overweight from eating too much meat, fish and vegetables? and wholesome foods.
All right. Well, look, if you're like throwing like loads of fat in there and stuff as well, and you're like, you're putting butter in your rice, and you're making a food like a hedonistic food, but then it's not. That's not what I described.
If you're making it super rich with all of that kind of stuff, exactly, it's not what you just described.
Exactly. So that would be the place to start. Now, in terms of hydration, of course, water is so important. Make sure that you're drinking 2 to 4 litres of water a day. And I say 4 litres, if you are breastfeeding and you've got a very hungry baby, you are going to need a lot of fluids. Similarly, if you're training, if you're exercising, if you're currently carrying a lot of body weight, body fat, you're going to need more fluids. Now, those 4 starting meals, for some people, that's not going to be enough food. And in which case, we would need to increase those portion sizes. And for some people, if you're tiny, that's going to be quite a lot of food. Now, if you want to go into more detail, this is what we do at Chase Life. And I think I've also covered this in fact, I have covered this in the Athletic Fox Collective as well. So, like David said, like this is just a starting point. Now, that is from the practical. That's what you need to do side. Like if I send you away and go and do that for a month and you report back to me and you're either going to lost weight or you've stayed the same. Okay, then we're going to adjust it from there. We also have to look at your movement and, of course, your sleep. So in terms of your movement, where do I even begin losing weight? Right now, the very first thing I always say is, do not forget the gym. Just forget it. You've got too much going on. We really need to start learning to manage your nutrition first, your hydration, your sleep, your stress, and then we can add training on top of that. So I will, of course, always add in non-exercise activity in the form of steps. So we have your nutrition, good, tick, that's done. We've got your hydration, you've got 2 to 4 litres of water, good, tick, done. Now we move on to your sleep and your stress. You should be aiming to sleep anywhere between 7 to 9 hours a night. Some people need more, some people can get by on less, but those people who get by on less probably is still not functioning at what they're capable of. So I always recommend to be in bed and asleep 7 to 9 hours. I certainly don't have the luxury of having 9 hours sleep a night at the moment with a little one, with 2 little ones, but do what you can. And then we have to look at managing your stress. That is a whole other topic for another day, which I think we've also previously covered on different podcasts. Because here's the thing, if you're stressed and you've got a whole lot of cortisol running around your body, which cortisol is a stress hormone, which also is a good hormone. It's the hormone that gets you up and running in the morning. We just don't want that cortisol being sky high or mediocre throughout or at the same line throughout the day. Because one of the side effects of cortisol is, a lot of ladies say, well, I'm struggling to lose weight because I'm so stressed. Well, actually, when you're stressed and you've got this cortisol, it can also increase water retention. So you can actually look fatter than you are when you're stressed. I've certainly noticed this, if I have a big IBS flare-up and my body is systemically stressed, I liken it to wearing a wetsuit. It feels like I'm wearing a wetsuit and I've got this layer of fluid underneath my skin. And that's what it looks like when you're stressed. And so when we start to learn to manage stress a lot better, your physique automatically comes into a much better shape. And then to top it all off, we have your non-exercise activity, which would be your steps. So making sure that you're aiming for no less than 10,000 steps a day. There's a reason why, I don't know, whoever made the guidelines, was it the World Health Organization, whoever it was, said 10,000 steps a day. That's the absolute minimum that you should be doing. If we're looking for fat loss and for general health, I believe we should all be doing 12 to 15,000 steps every single day.
Yeah. I sometimes like to, it's somewhat of an overgeneralization, but it can be a useful way to look at things, to see weight loss and fat loss as daily activity, that it's easiest to measure that using steps. Mm-hmm. But daily activity, so for those familiar with non-exercise activity thermogenesis and NEAT, but just daily movement combined with diet, nutrition. Mm-hmm. That's where weight loss and fat loss is going to come from. And so, something also to highlight to people is that I think it's in the region of 15% of metabolism comes from NEAT, whereas only 5% comes from formal exercise. Now, obviously, there's going to be variation from individual to individual, right?
Yeah.
But and depending on what they're doing. But that I think is quite a big eye opener for a lot of people, because they place so much emphasis on exercise and like, I'm training 4 times a week, but then they're sedentary the rest of the time.
Yeah. And I've been guilty of this. Oh my gosh, I think, I remember it must have been 2014. One of my clients came in with a Fitbit on, and I was like, Mikey, what are you wearing one of these things for? And he was like, I've got this new thing. And he said, I bought you one. So I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, I'm pretty fit, and I was like, I was really well conditioned, and I was training hard and, doing a lot of conditioning work. And I started wearing this Fitbit, and I was like, man, I'm so sedentary. I was only doing, at best, 7,000 steps a day, at best. And I technically had an office job, and I was just doing a little bit of PT then as well. So I then, in late 2014, 2015, I made an effort to do 10 to 15,000 steps every single day. Oh my God, I cannot tell you how much easier it is to stay lean. Without trying at all. It's so much easier. And so I've now obviously started to implement this heavily with clients, and it's something that I wish that I had done before. It's something that, as a former competitor, you do a lot of walking and you do a lot of cardio. But I definitely think that this non-exercise activities, just general steps, walking to the shops, walking to the gym, this is where it's at for sure.
Yeah. And then, so that's on that side. And then training and specifically weight training can be seen as building a physique. So now we're looking at, changing the contours of the body using muscle tissue primarily. And
The other reason as well is because, if we have a beginner, and this is where experience tells you this when you've been in the industry long enough. Look, weight training is awesome, and I think everybody should be weight training, especially women. Well, women should be weight training, especially as you get older, 40 plus, weight train. It's amazing. But don't use weight training necessarily for weight loss, because whilst, yes, it's important to build muscle, because obviously that improves your metabolic rate, going to the gym and lifting weights in that session isn't going to burn the energy that you would burn from doing, 15,000 steps, for example. And the other thing is that if you're doing high intensity cardio to burn energy, that's also then going to affect your hunger, energy, and cravings. So it's really difficult to then maintain and stick to, a balanced or, a deficit, a calorie deficit, if you like, whilst you're doing high intensity cardio, because that kind of training makes you really physically hungry. And actually, if you're doing that kind of training, this is where, your body's not a robot. So if you've been told that you can only eat 1,600 calories a day, but then you go and do a massive leg session, on a Tuesday evening, and then on Wednesday morning you're doing HIIT training, well, no wonder by Wednesday lunchtime you're dying to eat because you're so hungry. You're physically hungry. That's great. We need to feed your body, not starve it. And this is where, if you don't listen to your body and you don't trust what your body's telling you, this is when it's going to end up in a binge.
Yeah. So if you do 12 to 15,000 steps, then you're going to increase energy expenditure, but the increase in appetite is negligible, if anything at all.
Yeah.
Whereas when people are doing loads of HIIT training and loads of formal cardio and running and cycling, and for so many people, their appetite just goes through the roof.
100%.
Yeah.
And everything that we've talked about now completely applies to postpartum as well. So if you're listening to this and you are postpartum, you can use these principles after you've, almost immediately after you've had your baby. If you're still hungry after having had those 4 meals, that's okay. Just make your meal sizes a little bit bigger. And actually, in this manner, I feel, in my experience, a lot of ladies are eating more healthy food, and it's producing, better milk if you're breastfeeding. It's also important to make sure that you have, these really good nutrients to repair your body in the 4th trimester. So this would be the place to start. And it's not focused on fat loss, so to speak, in those first 6 to 12 weeks of postpartum. It's about health, but in my opinion, the two also go hand in hand.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's move on. So next question. What is the best macro split for fat loss? Well,
honestly, it doesn't matter. You've got to be in a calorie deficit. We can't defy the laws of science. You have to burn more fuel than you're taking on board. Like, that is it. But there are ways of doing it, and we have to work the ways that are in favor of your psychology and working with your psychology instead of against it. So in terms of macro split, I'm not going to give numbers here, but what I would definitely say is make sure that you've got a good protein intake. And then the rest, for some people it's going to be a higher carb intake and a lower fat intake, and for some people it's going to be a higher fat intake and a lower carb intake. So you've got to work basically what's best for you.
Yeah, I also think that people are just being monstrously over analytical and perfectionist about it, and people don't realize that you actually have quite a range of variability when it comes to macro splits. And people think it has to be like this specific number. And actually, you can fluctuate by, a significant amount, and it's not going to make that much difference. The thing that's going to make the difference is when you're binging and overeating, and
exactly.
And so people are obsessing over things that really don't matter.
100%. And if you've got a good protein, I am hot on protein intake.
Yep.
I am hot on that. So, okay, I will give guidelines for protein intake. So my advice, if you're looking for fat loss, is 2 grams per kilo of body weight. So, if you're 60 kilos at the moment, then I would recommend that you have around 120 grams of protein per day, which, if we work it out, that looks roughly, if we're going to look at palm sizes, that looks roughly a palm and a palm and a half, 4 meals a day. Done. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the carbs or the fats, well, it depends on how you feel. I know, for example, David does a lot better on a higher carb
and lower fat,
whereas I do better on kind of like a moderate fat, moderate carb. Although I have done higher carb, lower fat, I get really hungry on high carb.
But the thing is that if I ate the same way that you do, it's going to have such a negligible impact on my physique.
Yeah.
And this is where people are just massively overanalyzing it. It's going to have very little, assuming, we obviously adjust it for the same amount of calories, but if the ratios are the same as what you had, it would have barely any change.
And so this is why you've got to go by how you feel, right? And if you're not experienced in nutrition, then this is where you would get a coach to sort of help you adjust things for you.
Yep. Do you hold weight and fat while breastfeeding?
Yes, you absolutely can do. Look, here's the thing. I've never seen it. I'm sure I'll find one on Instagram today. One will just appear on my feed. But I was going to say I've never seen a shredded woman who has just given birth and she's breastfeeding.
With striated glutes.
Yeah, with or somebody who's very, very lean. That's not to say breastfeeding and holding weight and body fat whilst breastfeeding, that's not an excuse to eat whatever you want whilst you're breastfeeding. You can lose weight while you're breastfeeding, and you can do it in a very healthy, sustainable manner, especially if you have weight to lose in the first place. Okay, so some ladies have put on a lot of weight during pregnancy, and some ladies find that the weight just falls off during breastfeeding. Great, good for you. And it doesn't mean that it's, a lot of women say, don't worry, just wait till you're breastfeeding and the weight will just fall off you. For some people it does, and for some people it doesn't. And for those that it doesn't, I personally know, after I've given birth, I put on body fat. Twice that I've attempted breastfeeding, and I've frankly failed miserably, but I've, breastfed, my body put on body fat. I needed to put on body fat in order to produce milk. That is normal. That's fine. And so, yes, in some circumstances you can hold fat and body fat. Not everybody does, but I found that those ladies who have lost weight while breastfeeding, they don't necessarily I'm just trying to think of the best way to say this. Then you don't become really lean from breastfeeding. So when I'm looking at a female physique and I'm looking at two things, I'm looking at, okay, how much weight does this lady need to lose, or how much body fat does she need to lose to get her to, sort of a good healthy weight of body fat. And then we sometimes have ladies who want to take things a little bit further and to get, fairly lean, where they've got, a bit of shape in their quads, they've got a bit of shape in their glutes, they've got sort of, faint lines in their tummy. I've not seen a lady who has held muscle during pregnancy and is still that muscular postpartum and that sort of level of leanness postpartum that early on. I'll be honest with you. So I've only found it once you stop breastfeeding, can you then really start to really transform your physique again. That's not to say that you can't lose the 10, 15, 20 kilos that you gained during pregnancy. I would say that as a general guideline, it might be, the last 5 kilos, the last 2 to 5 kilos that once you finish breastfeeding. What am I now? I'm nearly 5 months postpartum. I've only just stopped lactating now. And only now am I really starting to see changes in my body. And that's just personal experience for me. It's going to be different from person to person.
Next, what types of foods are your favourites? Give us some food ideas that help you stay on track.
Oh, wow, this could open a real can of worms. Okay, so if you're going to ask me what foods are my favourite, I'm going to tell you fucking cheese, wine and chocolate. And do you think that's going to help you stay on track? No.
Thai food.
And Thai food. Oh, yeah. Okay, this is a bit of a loaded question because I don't ever think about whether I'm on track or off track. I just eat. I just eat real food when I'm hungry or, I just eat. And so I almost find it difficult to answer a question like this.
Yeah, although in a way that's not entirely true, there's a lot of things that you kind of do automatically, but as all of us do, we fluctuate within a range.
For sure.
And when you're able to stay in shape year round, there's a range that you're happy to fluctuate within. And so there will be times when perhaps you have, just purely because you've consciously chosen to do so, to enjoy more wine and chocolate, for example. If we go on holiday, chances are that's going to happen. But when you do, then if you're a little bit softer and you decide, I'm going to bring it back again, and some other people might
that's
label
not being off track,
exactly. It's not being off track. It's just making reasoned adjustments so that you stay within your happy range.
Do you know, because we've been in lockdown for so long, I've actually forgotten what it's like to go on holiday. It's just become the norm of I'm just in a house all the time. So I don't even think about going out and doing things. Although I did go out last Saturday night for drinks with the girls. It was so exciting. And because we're still in part lockdown here in the UAE, we had to be home by 10 o'clock, which was probably a good thing. Otherwise, it would have gotten a little bit exciting. But speaking of wine, so look, in terms of, this whole thing about staying on track, I don't even feel that when I go on holiday and I put on some weight or I get a little bit softer, I get a little bit fatter, that's not off track. I've consciously chosen to eat and drink that way. And so I think we have to kind of be really careful with our language here around what's on track and off track. It's the same as good and bad. So, if I'm going to answer your question in the way that you want me to answer it, of what are your favorite foods, give me some ideas of what you eat. Well, the kind of foods that I eat are pretty much as I described before. I eat, lots of proteins from chicken and beef and, fish and that sort of thing. In fact, David even caught a fish the other day.
I did, so excited.
You were such a good hunter. It was definitely a proud, happy moment. You should have seen him when he walked through the door. You were so excited. Some fish, and I eat lots of vegetables. I, of course, struggle with chronic IBS, so I eat vegetables in alignment with FODMAP foods, and then I eat carbs, and my carbs come from white rice, white potato, and no, they're not dirty carbs, and they're not bad carbs. Those are the carbs that they're certainly my choice of carbs. And then in terms of fats, my choices of fats are, I don't know, butter, some sesame oil if I'm doing a stir fry, cheese. So really, there's no foods that are off limits. I'm literally just thinking about foods that I ate yesterday. I made myself some egg fried rice yesterday. So there's no food that's off limits. And if there are times where perhaps I've had, it's really hot here in the UAE now. I'm not doing as many steps as I was previously. I've dropped from probably 15,000 steps a day. I'm just habitually chasing around after the kids to about 10,000 because I'm in the house most of the day because it's really hot outside. I've adjusted my food intake because of that, so I'm eating slightly less. Less overall.
Yeah. The way that I like to describe it to people is that we all of us eat for one of two reasons. It's either functional, as in you're doing it for the energy and the nutrients, or it's emotional. And Rachel and I eat chocolate and we drink wine. And when we do those things, it's 100% emotional. We're not drinking the wine for the resveratrol. We're drinking it because we like it. Now, the difference is that we have choice. It's not a compulsion that is out of our control. So we are always able to eat and drink those things in alignment with our values, whatever our lifestyle values are, our health, fitness, and well-being values. We never are over-consuming those things because we can't control ourselves. It's a choice, right? So that, I think, is the difference versus what a lot of people are doing when they label it as being an emotional eater. For them, they're trying to manage their emotions using food, and it's a compulsion that's out of their control. So that's the difference on that side of things. Now, when we look at functional food, so we want to be able to eat functional food the majority of the time. Functional food is food that prioritizes speed and ease of meal prep over taste. Now, that never means you're eating food that you don't like or suffering through. It just means that it just tastes okay. And the majority of the time you want to be able to eat those foods. When we look at people who make sustainable body transformations and stay that way for the rest of their life, the majority of the time they are eating functional foods. And of course, they enjoy their food. And there's plenty of occasions when they're able to, go to a restaurant and have a really delicious, indulgent meal. But the majority of the time, they're totally happy eating functional food. Now, with that, I need to emphasize that there's a massive difference between functional food and what we could label as being diet food.
Yeah,
right?
Let's talk about diet food.
Because diet food is where it feels so bland and so boring that you're never going to sustain it long term. No. You might do it for a short period of time, but you're never going to sustain it long term. So that's where I think, going back to this question about give us some food ideas that help you stay on track. Well, Rachel's already given you a starting framework for baseline nutrition. So take those ingredients and learn how to prep your food.
Okay, so on that note, one of the best things, actually I'm so lucky to have her, Manar. So I have to have a special mention to one of my best friends, Manar, and she's going to love hearing this. She's going to get so excited. Down in Sydney, she is one of my most missed friends, and she's also the most amazing cook. Please follow her on Instagram, Manar Eats. She does amazing food prep. She's helped with all of our recipes, with what we do here. But she is awesome, and she's so contactable, and she's really funny as well. So please go and follow Manar Eats and buy her stuff because she is amazing. And actually, just simple things as well. And the one thing that Manar is great at is fast food prep. There's no fuss, there's no mess. And just simple things like learning to prepare your vegetables, your green veggies, so that they're still crispy rather than just soggy and rank. Small things like that do make a big difference. And learning to marinate your chicken, I never used to do this, and this is years ago, I used to just grill my chicken. I used to burn the shit out of my chicken,
plain chicken breast, yeah.
And actually, to be honest, I would load it with ketchup just to kind of get some flavor in it. But now that I've started marinating my chicken breasts over the past couple of years,
it's amazing. It makes such something that adds literally 30 seconds to meal prep.
Of course,
just makes such a massive difference to the satiety and the satiation that you get.
And I have to mention here as well, using marinades with, for example, a little bit of honey. People will say, "Well, isn't there sugar in honey?" It's negligible. If this is going to keep you on track and stop you from binging, go for it. It is absolutely negligible. Same thing of if you're going to use a little bit of oyster sauce or some stir fry sauce in your, in your wok fried veggies, it's negligible if it's going to help you maintain your version of a healthy, balanced diet.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Is there such a thing as stubborn fat body areas?
Yeah, well, yes and no. So for a lot of women, they'll hold more body fat, typically on their thighs and their bum. You just have to get leaner. And something that I see quite a lot is ladies who are quite happy with their body fat levels on, for example, their upper body, but they want to get their butt and their legs leaner. Unfortunately, this is a case of you just got to go harder. And perhaps you need to be a little bit smarter with, your training. One thing that I've seen as well is some ladies who've been in a weights room for a while, doing a lot of squatting. They have quite muscular legs, but then they also do hold naturally a lot more body fat on their legs as well. And therefore they appear to be, in inverted commas, big legs. You've just got to diet harder. And when I say diet harder, I don't mean to go and, like crazy tracking calories and macros, but I've definitely found one of the best ways to lean out your legs, more non-exercise activity.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so doing your steps.
Okay, good. Well-controlled IBS, but sensitive to food intake.
Fibre.
How can this... sensitive to fibre intake. You're better at reading upside down.
I am reading upside down, I know.
How can this impact fat loss? So well-controlled IBS, but sensitive to fibre intake. How can this impact fat loss?
The answer is it doesn't, actually. So...
What about people talking about glycemic load and regulating glucose uptake and the impact that fat and fibre has?
Honestly, it's totally irrelevant, completely negligible in a healthy, balanced meal, period. Honestly, if we're looking at IBS, if you've got well-controlled IBS, but you're just sensitive to, fibre intake, like fibre's not the be-all and end-all of health. And actually, if you've got chronic IBS, and you're forcing yourself to have a high fibre intake because that's what the latest person on Instagram is telling you to do, you're going to be in worse health than you are following a low fibre diet. Make sure that you've got plenty of vegetables. There's plenty of low FODMAP, low fibre vegetables that you can have. And that's definitely something to make a note of, is that just because you're sensitive to fibre, it doesn't mean that you have to cut out vegetables from your diet. And I do this myself. I pick low fibre, low FODMAP vegetables to have in my diet. But
you don't have much fibre, do you?
I don't have much fibre at all in my diet.
Yeah.
And if I do have fibre in my diet, it sends my guts wild. And in fact, then I have an inflammatory response.
Makes you ill.
Makes me ill. I then have an inflammatory response. I get really stressed, and then I have like this waterlogged body.
Yeah.
So go figure.
And then you've got massive bloating. Then it's putting massive pressure on your pelvic floor. Then you can't train properly.
Exactly.
Then
it's
you
a
can't.
Never-ending cycle.
Exactly.
I've clearly sulked you. Oh my god, my pelvic floor! I'm pissing myself all the time because I'm so bloated. For those of you who don't know, I actually with my second baby, I have a bladder prolapse, which I have to make light of because you know what, like you just have to accept these things and do what you can. But I have this, God, I think I was like 3 weeks postpartum, and oh my God, the incontinence was so bad. It got so bad. I'd run out of pads, and I had to use one of Amelie's newborn diapers as a pad. Like, it got that bad. And so I was like, shit, I just have to diffuse the shame that I'm feeling right now and just fucking talk about it. So I did Instagram stories, and like ladies were like, oh my God, me too. And I've never thought about that. And hey, did you know that a diaper and like a newborn nappy is such an effective pad? Go figure. So anyway.
There you go. Top tip.
So those struggling with pelvic organ prolapse, contact me if you haven't got somebody to help you with it, because I've got lots of people that I can refer you to for various different things depending on what you need.
All right. this is the last question we have listed, which is somewhat a repetition, I think, unless there's anything different that you wanted to go into. What do you eat in a day to give me some ideas?
Kind of this... It's the same, I think, as what we've already answered. I think the best way for me to tell you what I eat in a day is to go and check out Manar's stuff. I eat...
Well, we've already described it here anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I eat with, sometimes, honestly, whatever's in the fridge as well.
Yeah.
So these are pretty common questions.
Yeah. People are often looking for a meal plan, right?
Exactly. Let's talk about meal plans.
Yeah, well, you have to... This is why we don't do meal plans and we don't do like really precise prescription on things, is that you have to learn to think for yourself and make your own decisions and learn what your own preferences are. Right? For breakfast, I really enjoy warm minced beef. Rachel loves cold salmon out the fridge, which for me is gag city.
I prefer it hot, but I just haven't got, if I'm just like chasing around after salami, I haven't got time to do it. I will eat it.
It's enjoyable enough for you to get through it. For me, I'm literally choking down the gag. But you have to figure out. So take the starting guidelines that we've given you, and then figure out what works for you within that, right? Because you take a chicken breast. There's so many different ways of prepping it and making it taste like the taste and the texture is so different based on how you prepare it. So again, learn how to prep food and cook food, and go to Manar again
for sure. And I just wanted a quick mention on healthy sweet treats, because when you have come from a place of abundance and thinking of things that you can eat rather than what you can't eat, let's talk about special mention to, for example, ice cream. I love ice cream. I don't eat it all the time, but I do enjoy it. I eat actually quite a lot of ice cream in various different flavors. I've been told that this Halo Top ice cream was pretty tasty, so I went to the store right opposite my house, and they actually stock Halo there now. So I was like, oh, awesome. Like, I'll give this a try.
What's this stuff?
Oh, it's like fucking diet ice cream. It's rank. Anyway, I've basically just like blown the joke now. But basically, I got home. I was all excited to try this Halo Top ice cream, and it was fucking disgusting. It tasted like shit. Now, here's the reason it tasted like shit. It was because I'm used to eating very nice tasting foods in moderation.
Proper ice cream. So when I eat this pretend diet food, that's exactly what it tasted like to me, is pretend diet food. So anyway, I did share this, and apparently it's not just, thankfully it wasn't just me who felt this way. So this is the thing about healthy sweet treats, is that you think you can just have a little bit, next thing you know you've eaten a whole tub. Well, you may as well have just had the real food to satisfy that particular craving and then be done with it. Yeah, one of the things I often talk to people about when it comes to healthy sweet treats is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to take the nutrients, or attempting to introduce some of the nutrient value from a meal and some of the delicious indulgence of a dessert, and combining the two. And what you end up with is a crap amalgamation of the two that doesn't achieve either outcome. It doesn't have anywhere near the nutritional value or the satiety or the satiation that you get from a proper baseline meal. And it doesn't have the delicious indulgence that you get from a dessert. But here's the problem with what a lot of people do with, quote, healthy sweet treats. Let's take the classic low-fat Greek yogurt and stir in some protein powder. Is that now that you've labelled it as a good food or a healthy food, you have that first hit of it and it doesn't really hit the spot. But because you've labelled it as okay or acceptable, you go back for more. Then you go back for more. Then you go back for more. Then you realise, oh my God, I've overdone it. What's wrong with me? I've done it yet again. Well, I might as well break open the proper ice cream. And then you go for the proper ice cream. And because all bets are off and it's a bad day now, then you might as well just have a binge for the rest of the day.
One of the things that I think is really important to cover is, I know when somebody has had a bit of a dieting history, when they say things like, oh, I'm just craving some rice cakes, or I'm just craving something like a healthy sweet treat. Because when you've been dieting...
Or Nutella or peanut butter.
Yeah, like
supposed magic
butter.
food.
Peanut butter, like don't even get me started on peanut butter. Like, I think peanut butter is rank, right? I know, like, you eat peanut butter, whatever.
Yeah, I enjoy peanut butter.
Yeah,
but
I think it's rank, right? I can't even stand the smell of it. But peanut butter for a lot of people is like the dieters,
the holy grail,
of fat. But the truth is that when you've been dieting hard, when you seek these different flavors and textures, and people get these textures in Nutella and peanut butter. It's thick. It's thick. It sticks to your tongue. Rice cakes, they're crispy. A lot of dieters, if you've been dieting for a long time and your food is devoid of flavor, no wonder you get sucked down the healthy dessert route.
Yeah, and not just devoid of flavor, but also devoid of calories and potentially one of the macros as well. So if you are excessively cutting calories, you're going to get cravings for calorie dense foods. So obviously now peanut butter, instead of tasting like peanut butter, tastes amazing, and it's you can't stop. Why? Because it's calorie dense, and your body is saying, I desperately need to redress this massive calorie deficit that you've been trying to force me under. And equally, if people go too low on one of the macros, right? When people are going on keto or super low carb diets, well, obviously at some point you're going to get cravings for carbs. And equally with if you go super low fat, at some point you're going to get cravings for fats. And honestly, like, I would say that this also applies because some people argue that they say carbs are non-essential and all of this kind of stuff, and that, well, what does history tell you? When you cut out carbs and you go super low carb for a really long period of time, what happens? When you go to the Italian restaurant for the first time and you have that first hit of pasta or pizza, and then why do you think it is that you suddenly can't control yourself and you go on a monumental binge that then lasts for days, and then that starts happening more and more frequently, blah, 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 right? It's because of these things. So
I think, history, I can't remember what the saying is, that basically if you do something, what's that Einstein quote of, like, you repeat something and it's the definition of insanity?
Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Yeah, and the amount of ladies that I speak to who say, right, I've got to go back to the diet and the training method that I was doing 4 years ago because I lost about 10 kilos on that, but then I gained the weight, and so I just need to go back and do that again. Well, honey, it didn't work.
Yeah, why did you label it as a success? If it was a success, you'd still be in shape now.
It did not work. Exactly that. So we've got to combine emotional fitness with physical fitness. And just to wrap all of this up, when we're talking about weight loss and this buzzword in the fitness industry, calorie deficit, there are many ways that you can get a calorie deficit. And a lot of women are starving themselves to get the calorie deficit. I would much prefer to see a slower, smaller calorie deficit coming from food, and then using activity and exercise to boost that calorie deficit, rather than dieting super hard.
One of the things that so a couple of things to throw in. One, any approach whatsoever that forces you to suffer through excessive levels of hunger,
100%.
It's not going to last. It's not going to last, and you're going to rebound. So first of all, you have to manage hunger, energy, and cravings. Now, one of the reasons why baseline nutrition works so well and so effectively is that, now, granted, we, in answer to the macronutrient ratios, we said, well, it doesn't matter. Well, within a certain range, it's going to matter. Now, when you eat following the guidelines that Rachel has given you, those macronutrient ratios are automatically going to fall within a range that is going to be effective. It's going to manage hunger, energy, and cravings, and it's going to regulate your satiety and satiation. So what you're going to find is that because you're, one, proportioning your food within those ratios, and two, eating predominantly single ingredient foods and wholesome foods, then your hunger is naturally going to regulate your energy intake for you. So we can control and regulate calories without having to count calories. So if all of your meals are basically built using these baseline guidelines, your hunger, energy, and cravings is going to naturally regulate it for you. If you're hungry, you eat a bit more. Once you're full, you stop. It's that simple.
And yeah, a lot of women are afraid of being hungry as well, because of course hunger to them is, oh my God, this is real danger territory to me now. The truth is that you should be moderately hungry before you have your next meal. And one thing that I'll say is you shouldn't be going to bed starving. You shouldn't be going to bed with a rumbly tummy, because if you're going to bed hungry, that's going to affect your sleep. Now, if you don't sleep, I think I forgot to mention this earlier, or did I mention sleep?
No, you did
earlier?
list sleep.
Okay,
yeah.
Sleep is so important, because if you don't sleep and if you've had a bad night's sleep, that sends your cravings wild. So sleep is definitely a priority.
Yeah, leptin and ghrelin are going to get affected by lack of sleep, right?
Yeah, so what we want to do is, you might, when you're dieting, you're losing body fat. It doesn't mean that you have to go hungry, but you might sometimes experience the feeling of, I could eat more, but you're not hungry. It's just, I could eat more. And that's perhaps, it's 9 o'clock at night, you're about to go to bed. I could eat more, but you don't need to. And that's when you basically re-identify with your goals, re-identify with your new identity, who you're working to become, and acting from that place.
Awesome. I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
That's a wrap.
All right. So, guys, if you want any help resolving binge eating, emotional eating, or any of the core underlying foundational principles upon which you need in order to be able to build all of the stuff that we've spoken about today. As Rachel said, this is super simple. Going back to Einstein again, one of my favorite Einstein quotes is, things should be made as simple as possible, but not any simpler. This is as simple as it gets. It's as easy as it gets. And if you can't follow this long term, then that simply means that there's some really important mindset work to be done. So if you want help on resolving those issues, then reach out. You can book in for a call with us at...
You always forget the URL, don't you? chaselifeintensive.com/call, or you can just visit our website, chaselifeconsulting.com.
Amazing. So anyway, please rate and review the podcast if you've enjoyed it, and we will be speaking to you very soon. And don't forget to
chase life and
play beyond the rules.
That's right. Ciao for now.